right, developers. So we're going to start digging into objects, going into the 05 objects folder, the 20 objects file. This just here is a placeholder for us to get started. And now to illustrate a very, the important difference, the critical difference between an object, which is a reference type, and one of the other value types, right? One of the other data types that's a value type. So I'm going to put in here, again, a short message that's a string. I'm going to put in another variable called age. That actually age is going to be a number. So we're going to say 250. And then we're going to put up two examples of objects that we're going to work with. We're going to first talk about the curly brackets, the object literal, and then the square brackets, which is going to be an array. All right. The object literal, we've talked about it briefly before, and the array, which is going to be an object that allows us to reference a collection or a list of other objects. And so here we see in our little object graph how these things manifest themselves. I'm going to open up my developer tools because this is going to be important as well. So this is how that looks. So a couple of things. Let's see if we say var count is equal to 25. So I have two variables there that have the same value, right? 25 and 25. And here comes my little graph. There we go. And I say age, and I'm going to compare age to count. And this is true, right? And that makes sense. And again, it doesn't have to be a variable there. I could say, just say age is equal to the hard-coded number 25. That's true. So I can say message is equal to, is that equal to, so this is an expression, is it equal to true? It is. And that's the strict comparison. I can do the two equals and it's still going to be true because, again, we're just comparing strings to strings. Not a big deal. Let us continue now to understand a little bit about how this behaves. Let me do actually two. Another object is going to be this dude. Oh, this object. Right, and so this object looks like this object right here, right? But if I come in here, an object, all right, so look, and did I type it right? There's my n object, and then I have another object, and then n object. Let's see if I do 3 equals on another object, it's false. All right, because what we're seeing here, again, is one of the symptoms or features, behaviors that when we have variables, and let me take this to the drawing. When we have value types, like numbers and strings, so strings are also, while they're not necessarily value types, they're going to be reference types, but the way they behave with regards to comparing each other, and whether we say one object is equal to another, what we're really comparing here is this value, right? So even though these guys are two separate, and I like to draw this separately, I like to point this out, even though they're pointing, these two variables point to two separate objects in memory, when we go to compare them, we are comparing their values. Again, value types. So this would be equivalent if there were decimals. This would be the same thing for Booleans. However, when we compare pointers, right, variables that point to objects, we don't compare whether or not they have, they look the same with regards to the same number of properties, the same property values. What we are really saying when we compare objects is that does this object point to the same object that this variable points to, right? And you can see here in the drawing that no, those two variables, they do not point, and it's really important to notice that the object graph here is calling this out with a little arrow there, that it's pointing to two separate objects. Let's continue to illustrate this. Really important topic. And if I come back in here now, like, let me declare another, in fact, I'm going to say count is equal to age, right? So I'm going to say count is equal to age. So I'm essentially saying, again, right, age is 25. So this, in many regards, is like saying var count equals 25, in many regards. Let's do the same thing with our two objects here. And so we're not leaving the array out there. And another array is going to point to an array. We're going to hit save, and we're going to see how this graph now is going to visualize the difference. Okay, and there it is. All right, now again, take a peek at this on the right hand side. Let me bring this to a drawing location where I have taken count and I've said, look, it's going to be the same thing. I want to assign to it the value of age. So if you started to get that kind of hang of this, in your mind you might have started thinking, hey, count, the pointer that is count is going to now point to whatever age is pointing to, right? That whatever age is pointing to, which is this guy here, hey, now count is going to point to the same one. But in fact, no, that's not how value types behave. Count now has its own value. Count now is pointing to a separate, its own little space in memory. Okay, that's how the value types behave. However, if you look at the reference types, which are going to be objects and arrays for the time being, you see that the n object, it was pointing to this object, and then we simply took another object here, there it is, and we pointed it to the same object, right? We said this variable here is a pointer, and it should point to the same value that the variable called an object is pointing to. And so the object behaves this way. The reference type that is an object behaves this way. The reference type that is an array, it behaves this way. When we assign one pointer to another, we simply are telling the variable point to this address in memory. All right. So both of these variables are pointing to the same address in memory here, and both of these variables are pointing to the same object in memory there. So that's a really important distinction, because it's going to allow me to, that if I wanted to, right? If I wanted to, and if I'm not careful, if I start manipulating and working with this object here, I will inadvertently, if I'm not careful and I don't know what I'm doing, I will actually be manipulating and affecting what you access through this variable at the top, right? Because at the end of the day, when I use this variable to access the data in this object on the right, when I'm doing that, this is the object that I'm changing. Right here, this is the object that I'm changing. So if I'm actually affecting change through here, I can see it when I access the object through the other variable. So this is reference types. This is reference types at the very, very, very foundation of what an object is and how it behaves differently than value types. So what we're going to do now that we have that simple foundation, we're going to continue to observe how that looks and feels with other properties. What are properties, how to access these properties, how to change these properties in the next series of videos.